10 Facts of House of the Dragon that you must know. Those who are eager to watch House of the Dragon should know some important events in the history of House Targaryen. With House of the Dragon's premiere on August 21st, the early reviews have been mostly positive about the newest lore to the Game of Thrones universe. The new show from HBO, which chronicles the politics of the Targaryens, is poised to provide viewers with a lot of important detail about this notoriously difficult and prickly dynasty. While the series is designed to immerse the viewer in a particularly important period in Westeros history, the Dance of the Dragons, it is important for every viewer to have a richer, deeper knowledge of the many important events that have taken place within the Targaryen family before the series even begins. Number 10. The question of inheritance was often difficult. Part of what made Game of Thrones one of the best series about politics was how expertly it delved into the thorny questions associated with power and with inheritance. This will also be the case with House of the Dragon. Those who are watching the series should know that dynastic politics were always a fraught issue with the Targaryens since so many members were willing to flout the law. It is thus especially notable that Viserys I, who is the father of Rhaenyra, saw his own claim to the throne elevated above that of one of his cousins Rhaenys due in large part to her gender. Number 9. They almost never got sick. To some degree, the House of the Dragon had every right to view itself as above the common run of men. In addition to commanding the dragons, they were also remarkably immune from a wide variety of illnesses, many of which affected everyone else. This was true for much of their early history, and it no doubt goes a long way toward explaining why so many of the residents of Westeros, particularly the power-hungry nobles, were so willing to go along with the idea that the Targaryens were superior, even if it was mostly the dragons. Number 8. The Targaryens held themselves apart. Given that they consider themselves blood of the dragon, it's not surprising that, for almost all of their history, the Targaryens have held themselves apart from the rest of their subjects, whether noble or common. Though they might be willing to marry into some other houses, this didn't mean that they saw them as their equal in any way. As events would prove, it was precisely their belief in their own innate superiority which would weaken them during the Dance of the Dragons and lead to their defeat and expulsion during Robert's Rebellion. Number 7. Even with dragons, they were subject to rebellions. People might be forgiven for thinking that with dragons, some of the most fearful beasts in the Game of Thrones canon, that the Targaryens would have had an easy time of it bending the people of the Seven Kingdoms to their will. But that is very much not the case. For example, Aegon the Conqueror's son had to contend with several rebellions that sprang up throughout his domains. From the very beginning of their history in Westeros, the Targaryens have had to deal with the fact that they are, when all is said and done, interlopers. Therefore, their position as the kingdom's rulers was never as secure as they might like it to be, and they eventually were dethroned hundreds of years later during Robert's Rebellion. Number 6. Dorne always provided difficult to subdue. The Dornish have always been a thorn in the side of the rest of Westeros. Separated from the other kingdoms by mountains and being very different in temperament and culture, they have resisted the Targaryens' attempts to conquer them. In fact, one of Aegon's own sisters, as well as her dragon, was slain during one of their many attempts to bring the southern country into the fold. Though the Dornish weren't one of the greatest players in the Dance of the Dragons, still these old wounds would continue to fester. Number 5. Dragonstone has always been key to their power. Few castles in Game of Thrones are quite as important as Dragonstone, a location that will likely feature in House of the Dragon. From the very beginning of the Targaryens' dominance, the island was key to their power, and Aegon the Conqueror used it as a base from which he could launch his invasion and conquest of Westeros. It was often the case that the person who controlled Dragonstone was able to establish their own authority and legitimacy. What's more, it was one of the places where dragons were easiest to hatch, which helps to explain its prominence. Number 4. They were no strangers to dynastic squabbles. Like many of the most powerful houses in Westeros, the Targaryens are and were no strangers to various dynastic squabbles. To take just one example, Maegor the Cruel seized the throne from his own nephew, who he proceeded to destroy in battle. This pattern would be repeated throughout their history, as numerous family members believed, for one reason or another, that they had a greater right to the throne than the established heir. This dynastic instability would ultimately spell the doom of it altogether, and House of the Dragon would not be the only instance where the power struggle between family members would lead to another Targaryen schism. Number 3. They sometimes took more than one spouse. Though it is well known that the Targaryens almost always married within the family, it's less well known that they were also more than happy to take more than one spouse. Aegon the Conqueror took both of his sisters as wives, for example, and this polygamous practice was replicated at several points. Though this was a bit unusual as members of the family would usually marry the elder sister, it wasn't entirely unique. As would prove to be the case throughout the history of the Seven Kingdoms, the Targaryens and their marital behavior would shape the destinies of many. Number 2. They were one of a select noble group in Valyria. Of all of the many beautiful locations that are referenced in Game of Thrones, Valyria is arguably one of the most important. It is, after all, the Targaryens' original home, and for this reason, it remains key to their identity. Even there, they were part of a select few noble families who wielded extraordinary power. Thus, their belief in their own inviolability is something that has always been in their family. This detail dates back before Aegon the Conqueror began the process of bringing all of Westeros under his personal dominion. Number 1. They had a vexed relationship with the faith. Given that the Targaryens have always been known for incestuous marriages, it's not entirely surprising that they would have a very vexed relationship with the faith. In fact, at several points in history, the Targaryens have faced powerful opposition from both the High Septon and the regular members of the faith. These conflicts often leave very deep scars on both the members of the dynasty and the faith as a whole, and it would come to influence the behavior of many during the Dance of the Dragons.